So we're here to display a method as far as creating extension, or a technical application that creates extension. You will see this in a fair amount of old osteopathic literature, speaking about essentially using the knee as a wedge or a fulcrum. Dr. Still speaks about it, Hazard speaks about it, and there's quite a few other people. If you want to read enough of old literature, they will speak specifically about placing the knee in the patient's back to create essentially extension. Some will talk about essentially shifting the pelvis forward or shifting the sacrum forward, depending on where you put your knee. But what I want to do is take this as an opportunity not only to display the methodology or display the application, but also to explicitly speak about what different components are. Okay, so first, essentially what it talks about, you would examine the patient, you would find where there was a flexion, or you would find where they did not extend. So they like to bend forwards, they don't like to bend backwards. Doesn't matter where it is, it matters that you find it, and it matters that you can put your knee in it. Right? Recognizing that you want to be careful with how you do this because it can use quite a bit of force. And then the knee tends to be, for most people, a fairly broad contact, but also a fairly firm contact. So you want to be careful how you apply this, if you ever do, so that you don't just hurt your patient. You're not just kneeing them in the back and using a bunch of force, because you can develop a lot of force depending on how you do this. So just theoretically, we'll say that there's some sort of flexion in and around here for the patient. I happen to be using a slightly longer stool so that I have a place to put my foot. Some old osteopathic stools, or some things that you can place a patient on, will essentially have levels of rungs so that I can get my knee up higher. So as a theoretical deal, if there was a rung down here, I'd be able to get my knee to that level, and so on and so forth. In this case, just for the sake of what I have available to me, I'm going to put my foot here. Again, we said theoretically the extension is in and around here. What I can do is stop just for a moment. This becomes my fulcrum. Okay, so the knee becomes my fulcrum. It can become my fixed point. This is my sensory hand. We have a lot of different things we can describe here, right? So I can actually feel what may or may not be going on. It's also my fulcrum. It could be a wedge, depending on how you want to talk about it. My leverage becomes the patient's shoulders, right? So I can have the patient sit up as tall as he can, right? So I can have him do it. But my leverage comes from the patient, and my ability to use leverage as the operator, as the practitioner, comes from here. So my lever, relax, becomes the patient's shoulders, or my handle to my lever. We can say that my lever is the vertebral column above my fulcrum, but leverage is coming from here, right? We can talk about palpation. So the palpation, as I said, my sensory hand is actually my knee. So while somewhat antithetical or maybe confusing in terms, this is sensory. Now, because I can use broad contact for multi-point discrimination, I can also get sensation, right, as far as what's going on off the patient's shoulders, because as the patient's shoulders come back towards me, I get a palpatory or a tactile sense off the shoulders, off of my handle. The other sensory portion is going to be my eyes. So we talk about multi-sensory integration. Keep your hands and your eyes on the prize. You look at what you're doing. So if I look here, I'll see if there's extension occurring, right? So again, we've got a fulcrum, which is also palpatory. It's also providing tactile sensation. I've got my eyes, which are providing visual sensation. So I have two senses, multi-sensory integration. My leverage is coming from here. Right? Now, when I tend to do this, if I'm going to do this, which I don't often do because it's quite heavy as far as leverage is concerned, it's also somewhat odd. Many people wonder why the heck you have a knee in their back. It's weird for a lot of people, but under the right set of circumstances, it can be useful. Okay? So I generally lean back, and then what I tend to do, instead of using the heavy leverage of the patient bending forwards or bending backwards, because if somebody bends forward with their whole torso, and I'm on one foot, even though I've got the other foot here, it's an odd stance. I can fall over and I don't want to. So what I tend to do here is use the concept of relational motion. So the relational motion initially with the setup is my knee going forward, his shoulders coming backwards to close the vertebrae, to create extension or backward bending. Now the next piece of relational motion is going to come from the patient's own legs, because all I want is broad general motion of the vertebral column, which will allow me to utilize this leverage in a fairly gentle and progressive fashion. So all we have you do is we have you push both feet down onto the ground, right? And as he pushes feet onto the ground, I get resistance against me and then relax. And as he does it, I get a bit of a glide forwards. Again, push both knees down, and relax. Okay? What I'm actually going to have you do, and this is what happens. So you try something on purpose in a treatment sense, and when it doesn't give you the result you're looking for, you can change. So I had him push down with both legs, and it didn't work the way I wanted it to. So what I'm actually going to have you do is just sit up a bit taller, right, and relax. Okay? Now what I want you to do is take a deep breath, and then relax. Right? And I get a bit. I don't get as much as what I wanted. So I've used patient active by having him push his feet into the ground. I've used patient active by having him breathe. Now what I'm going to try, although I said that it wouldn't be my preference, I'm going to have bend forward just a little bit, try to take your whole body forwards, and then relax. And I get a little bit. So all three of those together, or as individual things, didn't necessarily work the way I wanted. So what I'm going to have them do is I'm going to combine them. We're going to have you push both feet on the ground and take a deep breath, and then let it all go. There we go. When I join those two together, I get more of what I wanted. So what we have is we have, in totality, a few things going on. We have leverage from the shoulders, right? So our lever becomes the vertebral column, but we're holding on to it and it connected way off the patient's shoulders. My fulcrum and my palpatory hand are my knee, but also my sensations coming from my eyes, so multisensory integration. Relational motion, knee going forward, patient coming backwards. Relational motion in the patient pushing their feet on the floor didn't work the way we wanted it to. So explicitly we learned that that didn't do what we wanted. Explicitly I then had him take a deep breath, didn't do what I wanted. Explicitly I had him bend forward knowing it wasn't my preference, didn't work the way I wanted. I joined two previous methodologies of having him push his feet on the ground, taking a deep breath, and again I got the result I was looking for. I got a more appropriate use of relational motion than use of the setup. So I had to explicitly search to do it appropriately. So in a given treatment methodology, I'm going to have to use lever, wedge, and screw, right? So lever, wedge, if I wanted to screw, I would have turned them, didn't want that, but I'll have to use that concept. I'll have to use palpation, I'll have to use tactile senses, I'll have to use visual senses, so multisensory integration. Keep your hands and your eyes on the prize. Then I'll have to utilize some form of force to activate the method, to activate the technical application. I tried to use relational motion by having the patient push his feet into the floor to move the whole column. Didn't work the way I wanted it to, so then we get explicit learning. On the fly, I have to try something different. So I use something implicitly that I believe might work, which is respiration. Didn't work the way I wanted to. Implicitly, I have him bend forwards. That's something that I've tried before. I don't like it usually, and I already knew that because that's implicit learning. I've tried it before and didn't like it. Didn't work. Join two together. That's where the implicit learning process joins with the explicit learning process. The three things that I tried didn't work the way I wanted. So through implicit learning, I've learned if I join two of them, it will often work. So explicitly I make that choice, and I learn in the moment that it will work the way I want it to, and we get the appropriate result. This is all to try to highlight the processes that will occur moment to moment. To stop, slow down, and talk about them doesn't make it look right, but it might help explain it for you. So often you purposely try one thing within a given hold or a given method and it doesn't work, so you try another and another until it starts to work. And that's kind of joining implicit learning and explicit learning. And again, talking about the leverage, talking about the palpation. Although it's not my hand, I still have palpation, I still have tactile senses on the area that I'm working in. It's a dull tactile sense off of my knee, but it does exist. So again, we just try to bring all these processes together and identify that they're all happening at the same time. They're all kind of continuous and contiguous. They happen at the same time, but you have to know that from things that you've tried before, and you can start to pull in and it'll start to mesh, but you have to do it over and over again, and then you'll be able to start to draw on these. The implicit learning is stuff you've tried before, the explicit learning is trying something and knowing that it isn't working right now, so then you mesh them together.